Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have with me Kryssa Marie Bowman. Hey, Kryssa.
Hey, how are you? Do you
I'm
want me to call you Kimberly or Dr. Leinert or what's the best
good.
way to go?
Dr. Kimberly's fine.
Okay, Dr. Kimberly. Great.
So,
Perfect.
yeah. And just so people know who you are, I'm going to read your short bio. So, Kryssa Marie Bowman is the visionary founder of Quantum Journeys Hypnosis and Quantum Journeys Hypnosis Academy, a trailblazing protocol that combines hypnotherapy with quantum healing to facilitate profound personal transformation. With a background in psychology and a deep understanding of the mind body connection, Kryssa has dedicated her career to empowering individuals to access their potential and unlock the limitless power of their multidimensional consciousness. I'm going to ask about that. Kryssa has touched the lives of countless individuals, guiding them on transformative inner journeys to heal, release limiting beliefs, and manifest their true potential. Kryssa's unique approach to hypnotherapy and her unwavering commitment to holistic healing make her a beacon of inspiration in the field of mind body wellness. So I know you haven't always done that, Kryssa. You started
No,
somewhere else. So tell us your story.
I did. Well, I was a weird little kid. I was the kid who had the imaginary friends. I was an only child, so like those were my friends, my imaginary friends. Um, and I was fortunate in that I wasn't ever shamed for that, like by the adults in my life. They just said, that's your thing. And my mom was kind of a new age hippie type person, so she was pretty on board with it. Um, anyway, later in life, let's fast forward to like teens, 20s. I had my big rebellion, as a lot of us do, but my rebellion looked like turning my back on all new age concepts because I was raised with by a hippie essentially, and she taught astrology classes, and we lived on a commune, not always on it, sometimes just near it, but and it wasn't like a culty commune. It was more just like a coming of minds, new agey type people. But my rebellion was to turn my back on all that. And when I went to college, I did applied psychology, which is not the touchy feely kind. It's not the counseling side. It's the like laboratory, learning how animals' minds work, um, learning how human brains work, biopsychology, that sort of stuff, lots of research, meta analysis, things like that, because I wanted to understand me, essentially, and why I was built the way I was. Um, and then fast forward again, by the time I found hypnotherapy, which I found because it helped me so profoundly, I had been in a highly abusive marriage, and as a result of that, developed agoraphobia. And mine was never the type that was so bad that I could never leave the house, but it was bad enough that it caused massive anxiety and panic. And I just had to push through it. And it was exhausting constantly. And I missed a lot of things because of it, like going to my kids', school plays and things like that. Um, and I was in and out of counseling, like talk therapy, for 13 years. We did EMDR, we did trauma counseling, all kinds of things. And I got some movement. It wasn't like it didn't help. It's just that it helped me get to the place where I could negotiate with myself, essentially, so that I could be out for 20 minutes at a time, or longer if I was with another person, or no more than 2 miles from my home, or like all these different sort of negotiations. But nothing really cracked it open, or dare I say, cured it. Although I've been feeling a little bit of it trying to come back. It's like knocking on the door, just because of all the crazy politics in my country right now. But anyway, but nothing got rid of it until hypnotherapy. And my therapist, my talk therapist, and she did EMDR and also DBT, but she suggested hypnotherapy. And in 3 sessions, it was gone after 13 years. So that's when I was like, okay. I could see myself getting into a therapeutic type setting if it's like this. Because the reason I didn't want to do the counseling side of psychology is because I'm well, I'm a recovering empath. I used to call myself an empath. I'm a recovering empath. I knew that if I was sitting there 8 hours a day listening to other people's problems, I would absolutely absorb that and like take it home, and it would affect me and my parenting and all that. But with hypnotherapy, that's something where people leave happier than when they walk in, which is unusual for a therapeutic setting, but it's the actual truth. And it just is like 1 to 6 sessions for most anything. And then that's it. Like, it's not the greatest marketing business model because you have to constantly get new clients, but at least the clients know they're not going to be there week after week for decades, just hoping to maybe feel a little bit better. Like, if they don't start feeling better right away, then I refer them to somebody else and say, maybe we're just not the right fit. But yeah, that's only happened twice ever. Like, most people, they feel better like right away. So that's my story. The highly abridged version.
Yeah.
I did want to say though that something that started happening after I got back in, because I started doing clinical hypnotherapy, not spiritual. But my higher self had other plans, which I didn't realize at the time. So the type of clients that I started getting started having spiritual experiences in their sessions completely unbidden. Like, this was not something that I was in any way directing. It just started happening, going into past lives, visiting the Akashic records, communicating with their higher consciousness, meeting their guides, their helpers, their angelic family, things like this. And so at first I was kind of like, well, maybe this is just a metaphor for their subconscious mind. And this is what it needs in order to be able to, release whatever it needs to release or acquire or up level, whatever. But it kept happening so often that I was like, well, I better start learning how to do this like properly in order to be a responsible hypnotherapist. So I started studying some of the more spiritual side of hypnotherapy. And then, again, completely unbidden, I started receiving downloads from my higher consciousness that ended up becoming Quantum Journeys Hypnosis. And that took probably about 6 months for it to start to really flesh itself out. But when I taught the very first class, I thought I was just teaching people how to do the trance part of it so that we could launch into the spiritual stuff, but using a clinical framework. But then, no, my higher self was like, oh, there's more classes coming. And I was like, well, maybe it would be helpful if you could let me know that in advance instead of just like parsing them out one at a time. And it was like, no, that's not how this is going to work. It's like, okay. So then there was a second class. And then a few months later, I'm like, hey guys, guess what? There's a third. Then there was a total of 6. And at the end, I was like, I think this is now a whole program. Huh. Maybe I should turn it into a course. And so I did. The rest is history. And now we also have a book, Quantum Journeys Hypnosis, although it's backwards. Sorry about that. And almost 200 students all over the world. It's an online course, but there's also a live component. Once a year, I teach it live over the course of 5 days, and you can do it in person or on Zoom. And I think that catches us up to right now today, because the live training is coming up in March. So there we go. Podcast is done. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. So let's just unpack some of this. First of all, in case people heard the word but didn't really catch it, agoraphobia. What does that mean?
So agoraphobia or agoraphobia, it's pronounced differently in different parts of the country and the world. It is a fear of leaving your home, essentially. Fear of, it could also be fear of wide open spaces, but it's more specifically like people who just get a lot of anxiety about leaving their home. Sometimes this is based on very real world events where there is in fact a threat, which is what it was in my case. But then once the threat was no longer there, in this case, it was my ex-husband, my body and mind couldn't quite let go of it. It just was a pattern that I got stuck in. So
did he just threaten you if you left the house, there would be problems?
he
So
stalked me.
Oh, he stalked you.
Yeah.
Oh,
and so, yeah, there was like a legitimate fear of leaving the house because he stalked me. He stalked me even when I was in the house, but at least in the house, I could lock all the doors and windows, close all the curtains and stuff. It was not a pleasant way to live. Um, but even after he moved away, and I did get restraining order after restraining order and all kinds of things, but even after he moved away, I didn't like, my nervous system was so dysregulated from spending years like that. Now I know how to regulate my own nervous system, but even with all the therapy that I was going through then, like, you always hear the process your emotions, but nobody tells you how.
Mhm.
Like, okay, that's a nice phrase, but like, what does that mean? And I finally found out. And now I know what that actually means. There is a point at which you have to feel the feelings in order to process through them, but you can do it in a number of ways, somatic or through hypnosis or whatever, but it's not just an intellectual exercise, which is what I used to think it was. So that's what
Right.
agoraphobia was for me. A lot of people have it to the degree where they never leave even their bed. Um, Other people like me, the longest I ever went was 3 months of not being able to leave the house at all, but I could make myself do it. It was just really hard. It's kind of like if you have a fear of driving, but you still have to drive, you have no option out. It's kind of like that.
Well,
Yeah.
that makes sense because I can't imagine parenting without being able to take my kids to the doctor or baseball or
Yeah.
wherever we have to
Yeah.
go.
And as a single parent with 4 kids, it was particularly challenging. My oldest daughter was of driving age shortly after the twins were born, so she was able to help out with a lot of stuff. So, yeah, thank goodness for Jasmine.
So, what was it about the hypnosis that kind of popped that? Like, I mean, you had been doing years of therapy, I'm sure from competent, therapists who had gotten results in the past,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
the hypnosis was the thing. So,
So the way that I sort of describe it is that so talk therapy is like working from the outside in. It's at the conscious level and hoping that it makes changes internally. Whereas hypnosis goes right to the source internally and makes the changes there, and then they work their way out. So that's what I needed, because the agoraphobia it's not a rational conscious choice. So you need to get into where the actual like neural pathways are involved with the fear and neutralize those triggers or depotentiate them, I guess is the psychological term. But yeah. And it worked in 3 sessions. I mean, something that we had been working on for almost a decade and a half in 3 sessions was just, but like I said, it's starting, like I can feel it right over here. It hasn't taken hold yet, but it's like kind of like, Kryssa, are you sure you don't want me back? And I have to be like, it's okay, I got this. But just because there's stuff happening right now in the world that feels unsettling and unsafe again, there's just a lot of changes happening really rapidly, and so like it's trying to protect me. It's not trying to harm me.
mhm.
Yeah,
So when it
but
comes
so
to
far.
that, I'm not going to try to say the word again, but when it comes to,
You
uh,
say it the way that my Scottish friend says it, agoraphobia. Yeah,
okay,
that's how she says
um,
it.
agoraphobia, um, does it help to have others helping? For
Yeah.
example, if you had trouble and you couldn't get out of the house, if someone actually talked you through it, would that be helpful?
Oh, in that sense. Well, for me, what was helpful is actually having somebody just do the stuff for me or take me with them. Because actually that helped. Because since mine was born from a fear of being stalked, if I had a second person with me, I knew that my ex-husband would not try to stalk me under those conditions.
Mhm.
Um, as far as trying to talk me through it, I don't recall that ever really working for me. But then again, I didn't ever have somebody with like NLP or hypnosis skills in my life to do that. And I was so fortunate, that the therapist that I did have for, the decade and a half, where we did get some movement in it, we got some help. It wasn't like it didn't help at all, but she was willing to come to my house on the really bad days. And this was before the days of Zoom. So that was, I just really lucked out on that, because I think a lot of people with agoraphobia, they don't even get the help that they need because they can't leave the house to go get it. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of shame in it too. Just I would come up with all sorts of crazy stories to try and like find a way to get out of doing things that didn't make it sound like I was trying to get out of doing it, because I had a lot of shame wrapped up in it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, just talking about hypnotherapy or hypnosis in general, I know some of our listeners are very familiar with it, but some of our listeners are thinking, "Ooh," because they think of, the stories of people, quacking like a duck and how someone's going to have control of my mind and I won't be able to control it. So, let's just
Well, here's a little known fact about hypnosis and hypnotherapy. A hypnotist can't actually hypnotize you to do anything that you don't want to do. So, for example, if somebody who wants to quit smoking goes to a hypnotist, but they actually don't want to quit smoking, maybe it's their wife that wants them to quit smoking or their doctor that wants them to quit smoking, they're not going to quit smoking from hypnosis. And in fact, they'll be able to use that as their next excuse. I tried everything, even hypnosis, and it didn't work, right?
Mhm.
Somebody who actually wants to quit smoking, and we call this at threshold. That means that they actually really want it, but it's almost like they need somebody else to step in and help them interrupt the pattern, the habit of it, redirect it, and give them permission also. There's a weird sense of just needing permission to finally stop doing the self-destructive thing, that it's okay. Those are the people that will quit, and they'll quit permanently. Um, so what I say is I'm a hypnotherapist, which means the hypnosis part is really just to get to the therapy. Like it's not like stage hypnosis. So I'm not going to make you quack like a chicken or bark like a dog unless you think that would be therapeutic, in which case let's do it. And I have actually had kids go, yeah, I want you to do that to me. And then I'll do it. And they'll think like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. But adults for the most part, no. I will sometimes make them like forget their middle name or the number 5 or something just to prove to them that they are in fact in a trance, because there's a lot of adults who they're like, well, I still remember everything, so that must mean that I'm not in a trance. And no, not everybody forgets all of the session, right? You're not like asleep. So, and you're not, at least in my practice, you're not completely unconscious because there's no point in that. I can't really do the therapizing if the person is so completely unconscious that they can't hear me. Like that would not be helpful, right? Yeah.
Right. So you can't do it while someone's dreaming. You can't put them to sleep and say
I do
mandatory
have
things.
like recordings available through my website that are intended for you to fall asleep to. Um, for the most part, they are like they start off talking to your conscious analytical mind, then go to your subconscious, and then at the tail end, they're sort of talking only to your body. And so you can be checked out for that.
Hmm.
And they're based on cellular command therapy hypnosis, developed by Ed R. Martin back in the 1970s. But I put my own twist on it because I don't like being commanded. So it's more like cellular invitation hypnosis, because
Oh, I like
somebody
that one.
tries to command me, I'm just like, I get rebellious. And I'm like, my cells probably do too. So you try to command them to do something, they'll do the opposite, just, to show you. So,
Uh-huh. I
but
like
yeah, for the most part, I would say being asleep is not going to be helpful. When it comes to my recordings, I've designed them specifically so that they can be fallen asleep too, though. And a lot of people like they have insomnia because of whatever they're going through. And so that's just helpful.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love that kind too because some of the hypnotherapy recordings I'll listen to, and then at the end I'm like, oh no, they're gonna try and wake me up, and all of a sudden my body goes, turn that thing off before they try to wake you
So you wake yourself up
up.
in order to prevent them waking you up.
That's
That's
right,
funny. That's funny. That's
because they
funny.
usually speak really loudly at the end so that you do
Yeah, so that
wake
you
up.
do. Yep. Yeah, and I don't do that. And I also have it so that you can design where you cut it off. So like you can download it and then just like chop off the very end. If you want it to count you out to wake up, you can leave that there, or you can just chop it off and let yourself go to sleep. So yeah.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
So the kind of the second part. So there are people who do hypnosis and all sorts of hypnosis, but then you said while you were doing the hypnosis with people, you were starting to get downloads and people were also experiencing
Hmm.
getting more information than they thought. they were going to get coming in to the
Yeah.
session. So what was happening there, and how did you transform it to use it to make it clinical so you could make it all work together with the hypnosis?
Yeah. So I have a clinical hypnosis background and also applied psychology. And then the more spiritual or woo-woo stuff just sort of happened organically. Um, and then of course I did, seek out training for that just to be the responsible hypnotherapist that I am. But it started happening before the actual spiritual training. Um, the information that I have received, because I now have an ongoing, very open relationship with my higher self and higher aspects of my consciousness, which is a whole other thing to unpack that might require a second podcast because it's a lot. But anyway, the sort of short and dirty version is that we are entering a period in humanity on this planet where people need to be able to have open channels of communication with their multidimensional consciousness. Multidimensional meaning there's consciousness in our body, in every cell. There's also consciousness in our brain, our heart. There's also higher consciousness. There's subconscious, there's pre-conscious. And of the higher consciousness, there seems to be multiple levels. I don't know how high it goes. I haven't reached communication with all of them, but like the Kryssa here that's in the 3D world is not really important to ninth dimensional Kryssa. They're like, oh, how's she doing? Good. She's still okay. Good. Yeah. Like if you ask that version, what's the next career move I should make? It's like, I don't care. Whatever. You're just going to be there for a short time. Just do whatever. I don't care. See you soon. But if I want career advice from like the aspect of me that's just one or two dimensions away, maybe three or four, then I'll actually get that information. But the information that I was receiving also through the my own past life regressions, which started happening both spontaneously and then also with, I have a hypnotherapist too. And she's also a dear friend. But when I started having those downloads plus the past life memories, it all sort of came together saying like, I chose to be here now very much on purpose. I have a job, I have a mission in this lifetime. I could have done it in a number of ways. Hypnotherapy works just fine for these purposes. But my job in this particular lifetime is to anchor in light and help people open up to their higher consciousness, their multidimensional consciousness, not just higher, because we want to be able to communicate with our bodies too. Mm-hmm. Self-healing is a very real thing. I see it every day, right? If a person is ready. Not everybody wants to give up their diseases. Some people are very identified with what's wrong with them. It makes them special or unique, or they get extra love or affection or attention or whatever. And so like for those people, you can talk to their cells of their body all you want, but it's not going to change anything because they don't actually want to give it up. And that's just where they're at. No judgment, right? But yeah, so that's my job. I could have done it through a number of different ways. This is the way that I found. But I also discovered that I had a past life where I did almost this exact same work. Yeah, it was more in a sort of priestesshood type thing, but I took the initiates into a state of trance, and then they would go into a cave for 3 days and have, I guess, like vision quests. So yeah. And I used to be a little bit embarrassed about talking about this stuff because I'm like, oh, it's so, but you know what? The people who are ready to hear this are going to hear it. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be drawn to it. And they're going to be like magnetized to my voice, to my actual voice, and to what I'm saying. And the people who aren't ready to hear it, they won't even, it'll just fly right on by.
Yep, it'll fly on by.
I'm no longer embarrassed about it at all because it's important that I fulfill my mission here.
Yes. Yep. Well, I'm an eye doctor, a vision doctor, if you will. And
very cool.
That vision quests, I thought, vision quests.
So yeah, maybe we need to have a session with you, Dr. Kimberley. I think that would be fantastic. I love having very analytical, intelligent, skeptical people. I really do, because I feel like when we open up the channels of communication with the aspects of your multidimensional consciousness, it just hits different because you're like, whoa, here I was thinking that this didn't really exist, and then bam, there it is. So
That's cool. So
yeah.
what is the vision quest? Are they just being open to whatever comes in?
Oh, in that lifetime, I don't know. I didn't get a whole lot of information about that particular lifetime. I just saw what I was doing,
Hmm.
and it wasn't me. It was another version of me, right? Um, and that it was similar work. But what I did was, and the reason why I went to that lifetime is because I had this persecution complex, fear of speaking up about these experiences for being persecuted or belittled or invalidated or judged or whatever, right? Um, and so I went to a few different lifetimes where I was in fact persecuted so I could understand why I was carrying that. And then I went to this one where I wasn't persecuted, where I was actually exalted and like really admired for the work that I was doing. And I was like, oh, so instead of just releasing trauma, which is what most past life regressionists do, like, could I just kind of tap into those skills and bring them forth into this lifetime? Because then that would save a lot of time, wouldn't it? And I could almost hear my higher self like jumping up and down for joy, like, yay, she finally figured it out. Like, we don't have to start at like, inventing the wheel again. She's going to be able to just pull lifetimes worth of wisdom into this lifetime. And it wasn't like downloading books. It was more like I did okay, the way that I put it is it's kind of like, how in those superhero stories, the origin stories, like they don't know how strong they are until they have to lift a car. And then they're like, whoa, where did that come from? It's kind of
Right.
like that. Like I'll just be in a situation and then all of a sudden I'll understand it in a way that I didn't before. It's almost like, there it is. Like on a need to know basis is when yeah, it's really interesting. Sometimes a person will ask me a question and I'll be like, I don't know. And then all of a sudden it's then I'll go, wait, maybe I do. So it's pretty interesting. I just try not to, I'm skeptical of myself. So when that happens, um, I check with myself first, and then I'll like research to see if there's anybody else who's come up with this. I'll also, ask other aspects of my consciousness or guides, like, is this really what you meant? Am I understanding this correctly? Things like that. And a lot of this is what led me back into more of the sciencey side, but on the quantum side, quantum physics, quantum field theory, because as I was getting some of these downloads, they were well beyond my intellect. And so I had to start like learning more in order to keep up with the information that was coming in order to really understand it. So yeah, and I wouldn't say that I am um, an expert on quantum field theory by any stretch. I have rudimentary understanding, but so far that's enough, and I continue to learn just because I'm fascinated by it. But it does fit in with what I'm doing with the hypnotherapy. So
So on a day-to-day basis, how do people kind of use these tools, or how do they um, keep open to
it's
more
different for
information?
everybody.
Yeah.
So I just ask. When we do open the channel of communication with their higher self, and I find out the name of the higher self, most of the time, not always, but most of the time we find out the name, and I'll just ask. In this case, it would be like, how can Dr. Kimberly continue to keep this channel of communication open? And the higher self will come through and say, let's anchor that channel in first, and it will tell us how. And then for you to maybe meditate at a certain time every day, focusing on a certain word or a color or just the name of the higher self. Or to like, sometimes it'll have like a physical thing, like when you do this, or like put your hands on your heart or clasp, like it'll be something that will almost like start to adjust the frequency on the radio dial so that now you can communicate with the higher consciousness. And sometimes it requires that you get really calm and still first. You can't really hear that frequency if you're really frazzled, and afraid. Like, you need to, being out in nature helps a lot. Spending time meditating helps. Doing absolutely nothing, which is the antithesis of what we've been raised to do in the 20th and 21st century, but doing absolutely nothing is like the best thing you can do to keep those channels of communication open.
That
Yeah.
makes sense because you're just totally relaxed. How
Hmm.
often are we totally relaxed?
And we're all receiving those messages. We just don't always recognize it for what it is, Um, Have you ever had like a flash of brilliance where something is just put together and you're like, oh, often that's the higher self. And
Mm,
it's just dropping it into your awareness because you're ready for it.
mm,
It's time. There's also things maybe coming through the collective consciousness that's just waiting for like an opening. Like, oh, there's somebody who's open to this idea. Maybe they'll write the book. Oh, they didn't write the book. Okay, let's take it and go over here now. Then you get two people on either side of the planet writing almost like the same book.
mm.
Um, so that's always fun too. Consciousness is just it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I have a little sign over here that says the greatest technology hidden from you is your own consciousness. It's
Oh,
everything.
yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So, now, Chris, if people wanted to work with you, how do they connect with you? And what
Yeah.
services do you have available now?
So last year I had taken some time off of doing one-to-one sessions because I was redoing part of my course and I was working on that book that I was showing you before and some other classes that I was teaching. This year I'm actually diving back into doing more one-to-one sessions because I learned so much from my clients. So Kryssa Marie Bowman.com, and you'll have my name spelled out somewhere down there, right? Okay. So KryssaMarieBowman.com is my website for my sessions. Um, if you go to the menu, there's also an option to look at Quantum Journeys Hypnosis Academy if you're interested in becoming a Quantum Journeys hypnotist. Or you can go to quantumjourneyshypnosis.com and learn more about the academy there. But also on the quantumjourneyshypnosis.com, there is a button that takes you to all of the graduates across the planet right now. And while there's a little less than 200 students, I think there's like roughly maybe 30 graduates, 30, 35, and scattered all over the place. So if you want somebody that you can work with in your own time zone, chances are you'll be able to find somebody in your own time zone if you go to that directory. So yeah, but I am taking clients again. I'm booked out a couple weeks now, but that's better than like not last year, but the year before, I was often booked out like 3 months in advance. So since I just started opening up my calendar, this is a good time to jump in.
Yeah, for sure.
On January 1st, in fact, when I was like, okay, let's open the calendar and start doing this again. And so now I'm doing like 3 sessions a day, 4 days a week, 1 day for gardening.
All right. That's wonderful. So now I have a personal question for you.
Yeah,
What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
cats and the ocean. That's why I moved to where I live now. I needed to be near the ocean and sunshine, sunrises, cats, ocean, chocolate. Yeah. And I'm not sure if that's the order. I think cats are pretty high up there though. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And helping people. I love it when it's like somebody who's been going through life feeling disconnected or alone or unheard, unseen, realizing that they have a whole team of ancestors and guides and helpers and angels and higher self. And then, like, you can't possibly feel alone under those circumstances. You're like, oh my gosh, I have so many people on my side. So I love that too. Just that it changes a person, it changes them.
Oh, that's for sure.
Can I ask you the same?
Oh, what gives me the most happiness?
Yeah, I would love to
Um,
know.
I have to say my family being by the water, like you said, the ocean. I'll take a pool, a beach,
Yeah,
anywhere where there's water and, just my relationships with people.
yeah, yeah. My kids are all grown. I'm still definitely very thankful for my family, but they're all scattered about. So, like, my day to day life is a pretty small little, just this little community here, and I love it. Wouldn't have it any other way. I feel like I worked really hard to get to this place of peace
Mhm.
and just fulfillment and contentment because it definitely didn't start off that way, you know.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, thank you so much for everything you've shared and for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. This was fun. I'm glad. I'm glad we finally got it scheduled too. I didn't realize that I had filled everything out, but not actually scheduled before. So thank you for getting on me about that.
Yeah, so glad to have you. And I have one last question.
Yes.
What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
Okay. Something that I heard once, and that is, how does it go? I'm trying to remember the exact phrasing of it. Never make a permanent decision based on a temporary emotion. And all emotions are temporary, all of them. I would say, additionally, and this is just, everybody knows this, but I'm going to say it again anyway, be in the moment, like in the moment. There's almost always nothing wrong in this particular moment. Now, that's not always true, but almost always true, right? Like right now, my house is not on fire. There's not a bear chasing me. There's nothing bad happening. And so if I'm right here, right now, instead of living in the past when there were bad things or catastrophizing some crazy thing in the future, as long as I'm right here, right now, everything is good.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much, Krissa.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, sounds good. Bye, Dr. Kimberly. Take care.